Well, welcome, Zarna. It's lovely to have you on the podcast. And
Mm.
thank you so much for reaching out and sharing a little of your story with me and um, asking if it was a story that I would like to share. Yes, 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 yes. Just from the little bits that I've gathered from your story, this is the type of journey that I like shared on the podcast. You've experienced a traumatic, not so great first birth, and then you've gone on to have a really empowering, positive, healing next birth. And yeah, that's what we're all about on this podcast. So welcome, and I would love for you to share with us about your journey into motherhood, about how were you setting yourself up for your first birth experience, and what did that all look like for you?
Mm. Thank you, Carla. Oh, it feels, so cool to be here. And yeah, I listen to so many podcasts in my journey, so to get to share my story feels really cool.
Yeah.
Um, so the conception of it was a conscious conception with our first son, and that was in the level two, in the second lockdown of COVID. So that initiation to motherhood and that time, and we chose not to get vaccinated, and it was quite isolating pregnancy. And it was just when the mandates were coming in as well. So there was a lot of midwives that were um, choosing to stay or to leave. And so there was less people around, and yeah, it was just it was quite isolating. I remember that being quite lonely a lot of the time. And yeah, when I was about 13 weeks pregnant, that was when I found out I had a lot of sensations in my womb that were quite painful. And I remember thinking, what's wrong? Oh no, what's wrong? Something's happening. And so I decided to have a scan at that point, and I found out that I had fibroids. And from that point on, as the whole pregnancy just was full of fear, it was so the whole, yeah, I was just full of fear, essentially.
What did fibroids mean to you at the time? What did
Yeah.
you, learn about them when after that scan?
Yeah, I'd never heard of them before, and I and essentially it was like right away I was told all the risks, like more higher chance of miscarriage, more complications in birth, yeah, and so it was just constant monitoring and scanning over the pregnancy. And I remember in between each time, like every time I'd go in for a scan, and I'd be feeling amazing, like pregnant, excited for my first baby. And then yeah, I'd come out of all the sessions, all of the scans being like, oh no, they've gotten bigger, which is quite common in pregnancy that with the progesterone hormone that they can grow depending, yeah. And so just they grew over the pregnancy. And so much of my focus was on these fibroids and how it would prevent me from birthing my baby. And so I went down the whole, like learning about um, the cascade of interventions and yeah, really I had this idea or this desire to be like, it doesn't matter what's happening to me, I will, I know I can birth my baby. Like that was what I was thinking in that process. And it was also new. Like I even remember when I first realized that I was pregnant, and I was like, what am I supposed to do? Like, do I get a midwife? What do you do when you're pregnant?
Yeah.
I was like, yay, we're pregnant, and now what? I remember having those kinds of thoughts. And yeah, and I found with the midwife that I chose that I didn't have a lot of resonance with, but I felt fearful. Um, I was afraid to change because I was like, what if I can't find someone? It was so much, yeah, of those kind of thought processes, and really looking outside of myself to um, get what I thought I needed, or to get affirmation, or and to, as you do when you're pregnant, wanting to be supported and held and loved in pregnancy, and birth and the initiation that is birth and motherhood and postpartum.
Yeah.
um, so yeah, it was.
What was your vision for your birth? Like you've mentioned, you've been learning about the cascade of intervention and you wanted to avoid that. Were you planning on birthing in the hospital? Were you planning birthing outside of the hospital? Was that even an option in your mind given this fibroid situation? And how did your vision compare with your midwife, who you said you didn't have a lot of resonance with?
Yeah, I was so set on having a home birth. I have three brothers, and I was the oldest and born in hospital. And then the rest of my brothers were all born at home. And so I really had this like knowing that home birth is what I was really, really wanting.
Right.
And that was what I was working towards. And that was where on that understanding, like that was the midwife was aware that was what I was wanting. Um, and that was all fine through the pregnancy. And then as it got closer to the time um, of birth, that's when things kind of, um, yeah, like just different stories that I think it was a lot her fear coming up as well because she wasn't sure. At that point when I was towards the end of my pregnancy, the fibroids were um, 10 and 12 centimeters in my lower uterus, close to my cervix. So I had such a visual that there was just this block.
Mhm.
And that was what I was sort of being affirmed externally as well.
Right.
And then when it came to 40 weeks and baby wasn't coming, and
Mm.
all the stuff about dates just cracks me up now, really, because it's just ridiculous. And I don't know if that's the right word to use, but it just yeah I and this time round learning more about apparently when you have a longer cycle it's more likely that you may gestate your baby longer,
Yep.
and also even with this conception of my second baby, he was conceived on the 17th day of the month, so he would have been closer to 43 weeks. um, the midwife was kind of getting, she was like, oh, um, because I was saying how I really want to be having the baby at home, and she was like, "Well, I wouldn't not come to the birth," and it was like quite like that kind of language, and I remember just feeling that feeling of like closing inwards, and just that feeling of like, "Oh, it doesn't matter, I can do it myself." Like it was like a real holding and a firmness, um, and then I got to 42 weeks, and she'd come over to our house, and we are sitting down, and she was like, well, I'm just wondering why your baby hasn't come yet. Like, and she said that was when she said she didn't feel comfortable to support me with a home birth anymore.
Mm.
And at that point as well, when you're 42 weeks pregnant, and just the emotions, like everything that was coming up in that time. Yeah, it's such a tender and sacred time that
Mhm.
um, I so would love to be held in that way, with that perspective and reverence and just care for um, mothers in that time.
Yeah.
Um, and so that was when we chose to go down the induction route. So we drove down to Whangarei because we live up in Kirikiri. So drove down there, started having the Misoprol,
Misoprostol?
Misoprostol. Yeah, and so that was in the morning, and then I was just having like consistent overnight. I remember walking down the halls in the um, hospital with my headphones in, and when a sensation would come on, I'd like feel like I wanted to dance, and I was like looking over my shoulder, and I was like feeling I just
Mhm.
couldn't get comfortable. And there was a woman, because you're in those rooms, and there was a woman in the room next to me, in the same room as me, behind the curtain, who was trying not to go into labor. And
Mhm.
I just there was all of these and things happening around me, and I felt unable to come into myself in that time. And then just the feeling in my mind and my body was like, it just was feeling wrong. And
Mm.
yeah, and I don't necessarily know what that was. Probably just for me, the location for one. So out of alignment with, my general values around self-healing and caring for myself, that of the places where I would look to for support, like, um,
Yeah, I think it speaks volumes, your description of, you had these headphones on and you were wanting to, as you were getting these sensations, these surges coming on, you were wanting to dance, but you were looking over your shoulder as a kind of like, am I safe to? Have I got that, privacy, that safe space to be able to just be in my body and do my thing? And no, clearly, if you're looking over your shoulder and, and there's women around you who are also, having their own journeys, going on, that's going to impact the energy of the space. It's going to impact your sense of safety and ability to go inward, to surrender to your process. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And just how important the environment is. Like, and that was what really showed for me in birthing this baby.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and so that was overnight, and I remember in the middle of the night, and because they were doing the regular checks on baby's heart rate and things like that, and in the middle of the night, there was irregular things happening with his heart rate, and I remember the nurses like whispering to each other and then saying, we're just gonna, because I was still taking those things I can't remember how frequently.
Misoprostol, I think you take it every, is it like 2 hours or something for 8 doses or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I'm from now hearing that, I feel like I was at 6 doses or something. I, yeah, not fully clear on that memory. Um, and then they turned back to me and said that we're gonna stop giving you those now. And I was like, okay. I remember I didn't ask why or anything like that. I just remember being like, is my baby okay? And then every time I would come, yeah, yeah, there's so much fear around if my baby was gonna be okay.
Mm.
And then the next morning around 9 a.m., so just, yeah, the night was happening. And then the obstetrician came in that morning and got the scan out on my uterus and was like, essentially, he just was like, what are you doing? Your baby's not coming out this way. And I was like, what? And he's like, you're putting your baby at risk. And I remember my partner and I just being like, what? And he's like, we're looking at each other going, what is going on?
Mm.
And yeah, and he said, oh, we can give you some time to think about it, but the C-section is what you should be doing now. I can't remember the exact words. And then he gave us some time, came back, I can't remember how long later, and I remember just crying and just being like, what, yeah, that such fear for my child, and being like, of course I want to do the thing that is best for my baby, what I'm being told. Like, of course I'm gonna pick the route that would ensure me, which is something that even, yeah, so much now realizing you can never be assured or insured of anything. Um, yeah, and so we agreed to having the C-section, and the feeling that I had in that time was that it was quite urgent. Like, that was, I remember that feeling, and then it was about, I think it was like 10 hours later that he was actually, um, I went into surgery. And
Mm.
in that time as well, I had, because I was not allowed to eat food or have fluids, so I had the IV fluids in that time. And so we signed all the papers for a spinal tap, and were essentially just waiting. I was still having sensations, but it was interesting. Everything sort of slowed down after that decision was made.
Mm.
Um, and
Susanna, can I interrupt you for a moment?
yeah,
Just, I assume that the doctor who's come in and said, baby is, what are you doing? Baby's not going to be born that way, is referring to the fibroids, and that baby isn't going to be able to pass through, move down and through, because these fibroids are in the way. Is that
yeah,
the implication? But you were given the sense that it was urgent, perhaps by, it sounds like the nurses whispering or whatever was because they were concerned about baby's heart rate. And so maybe that was feeding into that perspective as well. But then there's this confusion of like, well, if it's such an emergency, I'll come 10 hours later. It's 10 hours until we have the baby. But also, it comes up a lot where people refer to the spinal anesthetic that they get when they have like an emergency cesarean like this. Um, as a spinal tap, and they're different things. So I'm just going to point that out because listeners might be thinking, why is she having a spinal tap? A spinal tap is when we take some spinal fluid out from a patient to check for disease and things. A spinal anesthetic it's the same as an epidural, except it's an in-out procedure. There's not a tube left in your back to be able to keep topping it up because we know that you're not going to need it for long. It's just for the procedure. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, so that was right. Like you were nodding, for people who are listening and perhaps not watching. Yeah, you were nodding when I said about the doctor being like the fibroids are in the way. That's why baby needs to become by cesarean.
Yeah, yeah, and he was still like positioning. Yeah, he was high up. Yeah, um, and yeah, the fibroids. Essentially, it was always the fibroids.
Mm,
As to why, and so then yeah, as um, then it came to the time to be wheeled into theatre, and um, my partner had gone to get his scrubs on, and I was lying on the table, and I could see the theatre room through there. And then another anaesthetist came up to me and said, "Here, you need to sign these papers. Um, you need to be under general anaesthetic." And so I had this. I remember just looking at her like, "What?" I looked over. I could see the theater room, and I was like, "And I've been waiting all day in this emergency situation,
mm,
emergency."
mm,
um, and yeah, and I just remember that feeling of complete loss of control, like feeling so yeah, I couldn't respond to her in that moment. I was just like, what does that mean? Why? And she said, then she was going through how the chance of me having to have my womb removed in the surgery would be whatever amount. And um, yeah, and that this was the safest way for the baby to be born, that I needed to be put under because of the fibroids and the risk of blood loss, um, that I needed to be put under general anesthetic. And then she was like, where's your support person? I'm like, he's getting his scrubs on to come into
mm.
theatre. And she said, oh, we better get him then, and brought him in. And then we agreed to go under general anesthetic. And yeah, then I had the surgery. Yeah, and that feeling of lying there, when you're in that moment was, yeah, actually, I could feel how my body was in like quite a lot of shock, but then there was like this real trust in my being as well about the experience. Like it felt like two coinciding, conflicting
Mm.
things happening in my being at the time. Um, yeah, but then I woke up, and I remember asking, as they were wheeling me, I was like, do I still have my womb? And the lady was like, the obstetrician will let you know in the morning. And I was like, you could just say yes or no. Like I remember
Mm.
having that, like, do I have my womb or not? Like felt really important to me because
Yeah.
yeah. um and yeah, so then that experience of being um in the hospital recovering from surgery, yeah, just so yeah, there's that was partly what I wanted to speak to with the in the birth process, having the fluids and how that potentially can get babies' weight up, and then that when after birth that their weight might drop faster because of fluid retention. And
Mm.
so in that after that we had he lost over 10% of his body weight in the first week. So then there was triple feeding and issues with breastfeeding, and I was on a nipple shield for a while. And um, yeah.
Sounds like a pretty rough way to begin your mothering journey. Can I ask how you remember feeling when you came out of anesthetic and um, the whole process of bonding with your baby and the hormones that are usually there during the physiological birth process that help to support that bonding and help to bring in the breast milk and assist with breastfeeding and help with babies regulation of their heart rate and breathing and their nervous system regulation, like all that is interfered with when you go through a cesarean, especially one that's under general anesthetic. So yeah, what was your experience early on as you came out of anesthetic and in those early days of those sorts of things?
Yeah, so that experience of and so I just remembered as well that something else that I did before the C-section was exceeding. We did the um, vaginal swabbing prior to the C-section, and then we did the swabbing on his face after he was born. Um, just
Awesome. I'm gonna just quickly describe what this is about for listeners who perhaps are like, what? You are swabbing the baby's face with your vaginal secretions? Okay. Yeah, so this is we know that as babies are born vaginally and pass through the mother's vagina, they're coming into contact and taking on board a lot of the bacteria and other microbes within those secretions that begin the formation of the baby's gut microbiome, right? The gut flora that inhabit their system, and that's important for a multitude of things. For our gut microbes are not just there to help aid with digestion, but also with like immunity building, and even mental health is associated with having a good gut microbiome. So babies born by cesarean, of course, they're bypassing that route and they're not getting their microbiome seeded in the same way that a vaginally born baby would do. And so some women like yourself choose to put a vaginal swab in, and then when baby's born, use that to swab down the baby's face, and so that they're taking in some of your microbes. Yeah. Awesome, Zarna. Yeah.
Yeah, I went on such a rabbit hole in that pregnancy of all the different things and was adamant that I wouldn't go down that path.
Yeah.
But yeah, but I did. Um, yeah, and so breastfeeding, yeah, I remember in the hospital those first few days. It's really interesting as well having had this second experience with this baby, because like my milk didn't come in with him until like the fifth day, and he didn't even really latch for the first um, over a day. Like he had a couple of nibbles and sucks, but he wasn't really latching and drinking. Um, and so with my first son, I wasn't, there was some colostrum. I remember that I was doing the expressing, and it was just within that time that, I was using the syringe to collect colostrum and then feeding that to him. And yeah, there was just this story that I didn't have enough milk and that he wasn't getting enough. And I remember on the second day after he was born, because he was born on the 23rd and my birthday was on the 25th. And I remember one of the nurses coming in and being like, your baby's not getting enough food. And I was like, but look, I'm getting 1 ml in my tube. And she was like, that's 0.1 of a mil. The woman down the road is down the hall is getting 4 of those. Like, and I remember just being like, it's my birthday.
Oh.
And it was so and then there's all these posters on the wall, saying skin on skin, um and then we were told things like, you need to, why haven't you put clothes on your baby yet, when he was on my chest, and had a blanket over him all the time. And it was so interesting. Like, yeah, it was just such an interesting experience. I remember just this feeling of like often just being like, what is going on? um and yeah, so then getting home and having this, he was having troubles with latching. And so my first experience, actually, to come back around to this, when I first woke up from the anesthetic, um, and they just like put him on my breast and was holding his face on my breast and trying to express. And that sort of, there was no time for even bonding in that moment. It was just straight away, we've got to get breastfeeding going. And which, yeah, at the time I was like, yeah, I want that so much.
Mm.
And also I just wonder how that impact our journey when there's other hands, like even physically on my body. I'm completely out of it, and people are trying to help my baby feed. Um,
Mm.
yeah, so it's just quite, yeah, just such contrasting experience to this time round. Yeah, being home in my own space.
Did you feel connected to your first boy initially?
Yeah, I think I would have said that, but it was a lot of survival. That I felt that feeling of being in survival,
Mm.
and then have again, it's like that contrast. Now having this experience this time around, I'm like, oh, that's what it feels like, and
Mm.
I think that was, yeah, not having that time after the birth, where I was unconscious about an hour and a half after he was born. Um, well, I didn't, yeah, and just that separation and that, yeah, there's definitely so much happening in the body with the anesthetic, and um, then having the morphine, I think it was,
Yeah.
um, and yeah, so a lot of things in my physical body.
I'm horrified that nobody told you whether you still had your womb or not
Yeah. So the next morning, he was born at
initially.
8:30 that night, and the next morning when the obstetrician came in at 9 a.m., because he'd come and see me at 9 a.m. that the morning before, and then so he was there still the 9 a.m. after, so he'd had a 24-hour shift, and that's when, yeah, he let me know that I did still have my womb.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Far out. That's just that one thing in itself, how hugely disempowering and like, yeah, traumatizing in and of itself. Like, just tell me, have I still got my womb or not? Like I have a right to know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And that was, I think, like, because I hear a lot of women that have, empowering stories in the hospital, and a lot of it comes back to, from what I can gather from listening, is a lot that sense of, yeah, feeling supported and feeling like you get to make informed decisions. And it's
Yes.
like the loss of that can contribute to, yeah, that feeling of being out of control, or, yeah, and contribute to trauma, and yeah, that survival, just being in survival instead of,
Yeah.
yeah, the beauty and bliss that it is to birth a baby.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So, yes. How long was it after your first birth that you started to consider another pregnancy? And when you did get pregnant, what was that journey of that next pregnancy like for you with this as your past experience? Actually, perhaps before you share about that, Zana, I'm interested to know whether, knowing all that you know now about how your experience unfolded and about the fibroids and whatnot, would you have done anything differently? Like, and if so, what? Like, was it inevitable that you needed the cesarean? And how were you left feeling about that whole experience afterwards? Yeah.
Yeah, so the way that they did the C-section as well is all the scarring's in the active part of my uterus, because they had to do the incision above the fibroids, which were in my lower uterus.
Ah,
Um, and so, yeah, that after my first son was born, yeah, there was so much. Yeah, I would meet with the obstetrician, and every time he'd write on the letter, "Hey, love," he'd write, um, that I'm not suitable for VBAC. I think one of the analogies he used was that it's like crossing a road blindfolded, that you just didn't know what was going to happen, essentially. Um, so yeah, and so my Teo was conceived 2.5 years after Rome was born, and I didn't, in that time, it was kind of just motherhood and all of those things. Like, I didn't give heaps of thought to it, but I just remember how gutted I was that I didn't have the experience of birthing my baby. Like, that's how it felt for me anyway, and I felt so important to me to experience that. Like, there was just something about that experience that just felt massive. But yeah, and then when he was actually in, we didn't we weren't trying to get pregnant at the time, when he was conceived. But I just been yeah, I just been we've been talking about it and thinking about it, and listening to lots of your podcasts and lots of um, yeah, and it's actually yeah, we just yeah, just got pregnant essentially, which was awesome. And then that his pregnancy was just the practice of coming back to myself, like, um, and it just felt like um, how how pregnancy, like it felt so how it should be. Like I did a pregnancy test, but I chose not to have any medical support or have a midwife or and just got to be in my body. And every time a fear would come up or something would come up, it would be asking myself, yeah, what am I actually afraid of? And it was so interesting where that would take me
Mm.
and how that really diffused a lot of the fear.
I'm still not sure about how you were feeling after the birth around whether that cesarean was needed. Like, yes, the
Mm.
fibroids were clearly an issue, and it's shitty that he was born that way, but it was clearly necessary. Is that where your mind was at? Or was it more like, actually, I don't know if that was necessary, you know? Because for me, like, I haven't heard the rest of your story yet, but how did you go from that experience to, yeah, to like having a like a wild pregnancy, and like where did all the fears about the fibroids disappear to? I guess is where where I'm,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
sitting.
because in that time, like after Rome was born, in that time, I really didn't know if it was necessary or not, but the feeling that I had that it wasn't necessary. Like I felt like maybe I could have just walked out of the hospital at any point and gone home and birthed my baby.
Mm.
But yeah, obviously not knowing that I was going to have more children and how that would go. In that time, I was like, yeah, I just didn't believe that my body would grow an entire human and then that I wouldn't be able to birth
Mhm.
my baby. Like
Mm.
that was what I kept coming back to. And
Mm.
yeah,
So it
so
was more like an intuitive sense that all that went down was probably not necessary. Um, yeah, and that's what supported you around this next birth to be like, okay, actually, I'm just going to trust my body.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and it was yeah, when I try and tune into what I was feeling in that time. And yeah, it was just always realizing how much external information is always coming in. And um and again when I'd reflect on the pregnancy, it was like all this external stuff would come in then in my body I'd be like, but I know my baby's healthy and fine. Like I know my baby's fine. Um and but then I so it was kind of like this a cycle of going around and around
Yeah.
of feeling afraid, coming back to trust and then um but yeah, I think I maybe would have I kind of wanted it to be necessary because it would have um, felt maybe easier to be with and easier for me to be like, oh, it was what I needed.
Yeah.
That was what had to happen. But then in the process of being pregnant the second time round and reflecting and coming into that, I really saw how I chose that path. You know, like every point I did get to choose, even though at the time I felt like I didn't have a choice.
Mm.
I still could have chosen something different. But when I was choosing because I was afraid of what would happen to my baby or to me, it was really easy to allow myself to have whatever was coming in from outside tell me what I should do. And it was also unknown, you know, when you're pregnant anytime, like it's always unknown. And I
Yeah.
guess that's what this birth has taught me as well, is how much like how different birth was the first time and how different it was the second time. Like, how would it be different again? Like, you know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. There's so many unknowns, isn't there? And it really is such an inner journey that we go on. The biggest work we do is on ourselves and doing a deep dive into, like I loved how you described earlier, when fears were cropping up, and you'd ask yourself, where is this fear coming from? And you'd kind of dig it deeper and dig deeper, and then it would always be like, ah, and then it's like, yeah, it's kind of unfounded, or it's not necessary, and I can let go.
Mm.
Most people have a much more avoidant approach, and this is an understandable part of our conditioning that we grow up with. Is we are conditioned to hand over our power and responsibility to the perceived professionals and experts, and we are taught that that's the responsible thing to do. And we are discouraged from listening to our inner wisdom and trusting the messages coming from our body or our babies, or our instinctive or intuitive um, messaging that we're receiving. And so I can only imagine the amount of inner work that was going on for you, going from that experience to, you're starting to describe Teo's pregnancy, where you were opting to have uh, no formal maternity care, no midwifery care, no doctor appointments. Like, that's massive. That's a huge journey to have gone on. And to develop that strong sense of trust in yourself, to know what's best for you and your baby. uh, yeah, that's quite something, quite a feat. So I don't know if you have anything else to share with listeners about how you found that safety and trust within yourself. Um, but this is just so key to the healing journey that went on for you, I've no doubt, and for setting yourself up for the birth that you had with Tao. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like thinking about that too, the with when you were saying about with the fears, when I'd ask myself that question, what am I afraid of? And I know in the last 2 weeks before Teo was born, we'd talked about, my partner and I had talked about death a lot. But really in those last 2 weeks, it was really, death was coming up so much. And it wasn't even, it was actually because I was told that the reason, the risk with fibroids as well is increased chance of postpartum hemorrhaging. And so that was probably one of the main things that I was actually afraid of. I really felt like that because the scarring, even though it was an active part of my uterus, I just really felt like my body had healed really well for that. Um, I just feel like my body heals well. And so I
Mm,
have that trust in that. And I did lots of castor oil packs leading up to getting pregnant and um, things like that. I don't know if that contributed to anything or not, but it feels nice anyway. Nourishment
mm,
for the womb. um, and yeah, so in those last few weeks, like that, I kept getting into this kind of, I guess, like anxiety about postpartum hemorrhaging. And then I had, um, so that, oh, there's so many things in this pregnancy that were just so amazing. It's so hard to like loop it all in.
bring them on, and it doesn't matter if it's a bit here and there and all over the place, Zana. Like, this is such beautiful sharing that you're offering, so however it comes out is fine.
Okay. Um, so yeah, I was asked, yeah, like what am I afraid of? Like why am I afraid of postpartum hemorrhaging? And I was like, well, because I'm afraid that I'll, die. Um, and then I was like, okay, I'm afraid of dying. And when I really went into that, I was more afraid of leaving my children. Like that was what that felt so, um, yeah, massive to be with that. Like, is the path that I'm taking going to lead to me leaving my children without a mother? Like,
Mm.
um, and but it was almost just in being with that and being held in that, that it lightened and lessened just by going in. And another part of it too was like, if that something like that happened, how would my family be supported or perceived? And I could feel how important it was to me that people could see how, like my family and just people could see how important it was to me that my child had a different start to life than um, and that's what I was choosing. You know, I was choosing life, not death.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, because you know the significance of birth, of the imprinting that goes on, of those early days and weeks, or even the early moments after birth, right? That this isn't just like this is important. This is an important piece of the puzzle, and you wanted that for this child. You wanted them to experience um, the entrance into the world in love rather than fear.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and how powerful that is. And when I kind of simplify the two pregnancies, I'm like, one, I was choosing fear, and the other, I felt like I was choosing love.
Mm,
And just how much potential there is in the not knowing. Like, and every time it would come down to that fears coming up was because I didn't know what was going to happen. And so it was, yeah, I didn't know. And
mm.
um and then every time I would be in that, it's like there's so much more potential in the not knowing. Because I could have just, and many times in those last 2 weeks, I was like, if I just went to the hospital, I could just get a C-section, you know?
Lots of the unknowns, lots of the variables yeah, become known when you choose the cesarean path.
Hmm.
You know when your baby's coming, you know, yeah, what to expect. And it does sort of seem to be possibly the most difficult hurdle to overcome as a mother is this trusting in the unknown, surrendering to yeah, to what we don't know, surrendering to your process and just trusting that it will unfold as it's meant to. Yeah.
Yeah, and I ask myself that question often, like, how can I surrender more in the pregnancy and in the birth? But yeah, so in the pregnancy as well, a huge part of it was having support from community. So much power I feel in being held and heard by women.
Mm,
Just like all the stories of women's births, like how that can impact. Like I know so many women's births that I've listened to that have, yeah, all contributed to me, yeah, coming into deeper trust in birth and in my body and just trust in life and babies um, and yeah, and because the apparently I think I don't babies start to have somatic memory from the start of the third trimester. So it's like it just feels like how we birth just feels so important for
mm,
me. For it
mm,
feels really important to me and for life, I think.
mm. So do fibroids tend to stay?
Pardon?
Do
Oh,
fibroids tend to stay? Like, are you assuming that your fibroids are similar now as they were when you were pregnant with Tao? Oh no,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. So when it was interesting when I was about 15 weeks pregnant and with Teo, and the fibroids had gotten so big, like bigger than I'd ever noticed when I was pregnant with Rome. And then one night I woke up and I was having a real intense pain, like contraction type, like, yeah, I don't really know how to describe it, but I remember being like, I could see my mind going into that, oh, what's happening? Something's happening. What am I? Yeah, do I remember sitting on the toilet in the middle of the night being like, do I go to the hospital? Like, this is really intense and um, something's happening. And it felt like it was with the fibroid. And um, and then as I sat there and I just went into my womb and I could just feel that all was well and fine. Which it sounds, yeah, and but that was just my practice when I come back to my body and I'd just bring my energy and feel the sensations in my womb and I would just feel peace in my being. And so I over the next couple of days had a lot of discomfort there. And then they actually just like felt I couldn't feel them anymore after that. They were like jelly. Like I couldn't feel them. I was like, oh my gosh, have they just dissolved?
So could you feel them from outside? Like if you
Yeah,
felt your
I could see them. Like I'd lie on my back and you could see them.
right.
And yeah, and so then I was like, oh, so for quite a portion of the pregnancy, I actually wasn't worrying about the fibroids because I was like, maybe they've just dissolved.
Wow.
But then in the last maybe 6 weeks, I could really feel them again. And that's when, yeah, a lot of stuff with, yeah, positioning was coming up for me.
Okay.
Like, can you hear me okay over him?
Mhm.
Yeah. And yeah, positioning was a big thing for me that kept coming up because yeah, with the fibroids being that I could always feel the fibroids down low and then he was up high. And um yeah, he didn't even at any point, even in the birth, was he down low. Like I would, when I was having sensations, I'd look in the mirror and I could see um all the muscles tightening and I could see the outline of the fibroids and him above the fibroids. So
Mhm.
just through the whole birth process, I just thought he was going to be taking a lot longer.
Mhm.
Um, but he just, yeah, he didn't take as long as I thought. Um, but to come back around with the support of the circle. Yeah, so that was huge. Having another thing that I did was having have you heard of Empathy Angels? They're a free empathy service. Yeah, and that was amazing because that would just, yeah, reflect back to me and then bring me into my body. I'd just feel what was coming up in my body when I'd say things. And so just really the practice of observing the sensations in my body. And yeah, whether that brought peace or anxiety or whatever that was.
Can you describe for people what Empathy Angels is or are?
Yeah, so they're a free empathy service, so anyone can book in. And yeah, essentially you just get reflected back empathy to whatever you feel like sharing at the time. And yeah, it's talking and yeah, I just found that it was amazing because so often, and again, like when we go to ask for support, and there are times like that was a constant balance for me between, oh, when do I actually need to do something and when do I need to just be? And so I was learning to trust that, and still so often how the mind will come in and be like, but no, like you need to do this, and um, yeah, and so just that practice of having someone hold that space for you to share what is alive for you and have that reflected back to you. And every time I'd find I come back to my own knowing in myself. And
And
that,
it sounds, I was going to say, and it sounds like this was a similar process for what you got from this circle of women that you would meet with. Was it, did you say once a month?
yeah. So we meet once a month all over the far north, kind of wherever the pregnant mama is.
Mhm.
um, and yeah, and it's just the circle of women all coming together and we all get to share and reflect. And yeah, that felt like the village feeling, like that felt like what pregnancy support should be like, women sitting, talking and sharing and being held and yeah, just feeling held by community.
Mm.
That yeah, and I sometimes I wonder that too with just the current medical system, how it's almost like it all falls to one person, and that's just one human, like that's so much to put on one human who's also trying to support so many other humans. Um,
Mhm.
and so how can everybody needs support in those times when you're trying to support women through initiations into motherhood. So yeah, meeting, yeah. So if anybody did want to come and join us in Circle, that invitation is so open. I just
Um,
feel so grateful that that was happening at the time while I was pregnant because yeah, it just it meant so much to me, and having a different women of different ages and different I don't know what the word is, like skills or knowledge, wisdom. Yeah, wisdom is more the word, I think. um, all coming together and yeah, supporting each other.
mm.
Yeah. Um, I'm trying to think. And I think in the pregnancy, I just did a lot of crying. It was like so much crying and just allowing myself to cry. When I was at that point when I was like, oh, do I go to the hospital when I was earlier on in the pregnancy and having those sensations? And I had what came up in that was like, oh, what would that actually give me? Like if I now got in the car and drove to the hospital, like what would that give me? And what information could they give me that, if something was happening to my baby, what would I do anyway? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what I found myself coming back to a lot, was that with this, because there was a time when I was like, should I get a scan just to see where the fibroids are? Like, should I try to figure out how I can do that? And every time it came back to, yeah, what would that give me, that
Mm.
information? And
Yeah, what would I do with that information anyway? And if it's not going to inform my next steps, as in if I'm not going to do anything different with this new information, how is that information helpful to me? And could it potentially be hindering, harmful, more challenging to have that information? Such important questions to be asking, Zana. I think so often people say yes to that scan or yes to that polycose test or uh, other screening tool or whatever, but without considering what information can be gleaned from that, how accurate is that information likely to be, and what would I do with that information? Right? So, yeah, we really need to be doing more of this introspection before, yeah, going along for that scan or having that test or procedure. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. And I think the other part of it too is just that keeping on coming back to my body, and like in movement as well. Like I found a lot of the time, how many kitchen dance parties that I had in that pregnancy, like just to like bring space for me to cry and to feel how I was feeling. And because it wasn't like the experience of what I'd had with my first birth just went away. It was like always kind of there. Um, but I really kept coming back to that, yeah, the potential and the not knowing, and how, yeah, that really felt so powerful for me. Um, yeah, and just asking myself questions, and those more questions in the moment, exactly like what you just said. Like, yeah, and then it meant it kind of, I think that part of that was the self-responsibility too, like by asking those questions of myself and really being in that journey, that anything, like it actually felt quite good for me to be like, to know that anything that happened it was on me, and I had to feel good about the decisions that I was making. And
Mhm.
that felt, yeah, that felt quite empowering, because it was, yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to share about Teo's pregnancy? Um, or are we ready to hear his birth story?
Mm,
What
yeah.
was your vision for his birth looking like?
Yeah, so and I think I remember making a little clay figurine at one point in the pregnancy, and it was just a woman holding her baby, and so I kind of would just have that vision of
Mm.
yeah, of me holding my baby. And that it was almost like, I remember speaking with a close friend on the beach on my son's third birthday, just before Teo was born, and just how healing the experience of the pregnancy had been, that it almost didn't matter how birth happened. And so then I kind of focused on that I was like, just being in the energy of the expansion of what the pregnancy had brought me, just being pregnant, like so much opportunity in that space. And that's how it felt. And it was, yeah, so cool. And then to come back to, yeah, that vision of seeing myself holding my baby. But I did do a lot of visualization as well. Like I would imagine and see, like sometimes I'd pretend that I was my baby coming out of my womb and into my arms, and sit with myself and just, yeah, how am I feeling and what am I needing right now? And yeah, keeping on coming back to, yeah, I was reminded by Hannah actually, who's supporting women in birth now, which is epic. And
Yeah, Hannah has been on a podcast episode previously, and she has since done my Healing Birth Practitioner training, which is amazing. So she's getting more and more into this holding space for others, and it's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Hannah is one of the people who joins that far north circle of women. Yeah.
Yeah. And she was in those like last 2 weeks when I was just everything was feeling a lot. um, and I kept being like, what am I gonna need for the birth? Like I was trying to prepare for the birth, and it really kind of came to a head in that. And then she reminded me, she asked me, "Oh, well, what are you needing right now?" And I was like, oh yeah, all I can come back to is this moment. And that was really helpful for me, and that um, to come back. Like, even as I say that, I just feel my body go, oh yeah, what do I need right now? Like it's so easy to get into what's going to happen in the future, and it's yeah, and so it feels good to be right now.
Can I just ask what your partner's uh, take on all this
Mm.
was? Like, how did he feel about the wild pregnancy, free birth planning? What was his response when you were talking about the fears of death in relation to postpartum hemorrhage that you had been told was a very real possibility with the fibroids that you had, etc.
Yeah. Well, right from the start, he just said he trusts me. And he would just we would yeah, he was just really supportive the whole time. Like there were some moments when I'd have to say, okay, I don't, please stop talking.
Mm.
Like not to bring, yeah, and because he was born by C-section himself. So I think, and then for his son to be born C-section, and then it felt so important for him how our baby was born as well. Um,
Mm.
but I could feel how he needed to process his fears around stuff, not with me almost, when
Right.
to like add to that. Is what I mean when I'd ask him to stop talking about that thing in particular. And as I got further into the pregnancy as well, I was reminded to lean into more when I was feeling that resistance or trigger to something that somebody was saying, because it was like, oh yeah, what is this story that I have about birth, and does this serve me or not? So it was actually those moments of being like, oh, I really don't want to hear about that there was something in it for me.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, he was just always, he's like, yeah, you heal really well, your body's amazing. Like he was just really supportive, and yeah, he was just such a grounded support for me, which is awesome. Yeah, feel like just to have that, because yeah, he just would listen and hear me, and as I'd be going off on tangents. um, and I remember saying to him that in the birth process, I didn't want him to look at me with like fear or pity or anything like that in any of those moments, and just to like say something affirming instead. And so I remember one point in the birth when I was sitting on the toilet, and he was like looking at me and he was like, "You're a birthing goddess." And I just remember being like, "What?" And then my mind was like, "Is he afraid of something right now?" Because that was so funny. And he did have some fears. He said, come up in the birth, some things happened, that brought him, yeah, some discomfort, but I didn't feel any of that in the process, which, yeah, felt nice that it didn't impact me in any way, his experience. Um, but yeah, yeah, we could probably talk about his birth now, I think. I'm trying to think if there's
Okay.
anything else, but there were so many things, and I just felt so supported, which was, I just, yeah, so I want that for every woman to um, call in and have the support that they need to
Mm.
how they want to, what feels like best for them.
Mhm.
But yeah, so his birth was, uh, yeah, I like, where did it start? Like, where should I start? It feels like it's that thing of birth kind of starts when you get pregnant, really. Oh, that was the other thing I did in the pregnancy as well. I did do the free birth, complete guide to free birth course. Yeah.
Was that via Free Birth Society or yeah, okay, cool.
Um, yeah, and they speak to that sometimes and that was the other thing I felt really supportive about that course, was just when I would have a question about something, it would be like just lots of helpful tips. Like something that you can do for morning sickness can be to slowly chew one cashew nut, and that can help with the nausea. And yeah, there's just lots of little things that I was like, oh, I remember thinking, oh, this is the support that I wanted when I was pregnant. This is the information I wanted from my midwife. I didn't want information about um, all the medical stuff and like what you're saying about, you know, the scans that aren't necessarily accurate
Mm.
and giving me information that wasn't empowering for me in that time.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and yeah, so the morning that, because the morning that we went into the birth process, there was a massive storm, and I woke up feeling real grumpy and wanted to get out of the house. And so we went to Puketi Forest and walked through the rain, and it was just pouring rain. And I remember in the birth that I remember like I would look up and it was like I could still feel and see the rain on my body, and it was just, it felt so nice to walk through the forest. That was during the day that day. And then that night, yeah, I didn't really have any. I'd had a lot of sensations for months leading up to his birth. Like I remember one time particularly when I was 36 weeks pregnant where I was like, oh, is it happening tonight? Like, so I wasn't even when it was just that feeling of, is it even happening?
Mhm.
I was never really sure. And I did have some losing of my plug that morning. Um,
So you're 43 weeks
oh
at
yeah.
this.
Well, I was 42 weeks. Well, I was 41 and 6 days to the day from conception.
Right.
So he was born on 42 weeks exactly.
Mhm.
But yeah, if I'd been doing my dates by the start of my cycle, I would have been closer to 43 weeks.
Right.
But because I knew my conception date,
Yes.
yeah, because he was conceived later in the cycle, which is why, yeah, and just knowing that as well with Rome's pregnancy, I have a longer cycle. I was probably, I wouldn't have even have been 42 weeks. And even having this, I think that was the thing that I felt um, most, well, yeah, just disheartened about, of that feeling of like, what do you mean? I get to 42 weeks and then suddenly there's more risk for my baby. Um,
Mm.
and when these dates aren't necessarily even accurate. And yeah, I just wish I could go back to that moment and have just been like, I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna keep
Mm.
waiting. And I
Mm.
have so much more compassion for myself now, I think, as well, going through that time, the second time round, and how heightened everything is and those weeks leading up to birth. And
Yeah.
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 Mm. um, so then yeah, that night, I started to have some sensations, but it was kind of normal, like kind of similar to every night. And but there was just the feeling that maybe it would happen. I mean, I was, yeah, almost 42 weeks the next day. I was like, of course, anytime now it's gonna happen. But it could have been in another 2 weeks as well. Like that was the
Mm.
other thing. I just didn't know when that was gonna happen. Um, well, like, yeah, as with anyone. um Yeah, and so that night we set up a bed in the lounge, and got the fire going, and yeah, put my son to bed, and then I went to sleep for a little while, um, and then I woke up and I was really uncomfortable lying down, and so I just went out into the lounge, and I had an armchair, and I just put a hot water bottle on my lower back and leaned the armchair back, and I just sat there and dozed and just felt every sensation. And because that was my intention for the birth as well, was just to get to feel it, to really be in it and experience it.
Mm.
And so yeah, I just sat there by myself in the dark listening to the sound of the fire, and I'd just get up and get myself some water, and then I'd go back, and then I'd go fill up my hot water bottle, and then I'd go back, and I just felt like I was in this oh, it's just this flowy um, darkness,
Mm.
just getting to be with myself and just really feeling every sensation from the start to the finish. And yeah, it just felt so cool.
Yeah.
I think that I just loved that, and that was my other intention as well. I'd really had the feeling that I wanted to be by myself in the process. Um, and because yeah, we did have a birth keeper as well, we have a little apartment downstairs, and she was staying down there, but she was aware that yeah, I was wanting to be by myself, and that would call her if we needed her.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, then I was just sitting there all night. And at one point, the fire started, and I was getting firewood and putting more wood on the fire. It just felt so nice, just tending to what I needed in each moment and just cruising with that. And then yeah, sleeping in between, and then there was no more firewood, and I didn't want to go out because it was a massive storm. I didn't want to go out, and it was the full moon as well. And I didn't want to go out and get cold wood in the rain, obviously. And as I could feel the room started getting colder, and I'd start to shiver. So I woke my partner up to come and I just remember the sound of the lighter going click, click, click. Like, took so long for him to get the fire going again. And I was just
Yeah.
like, that sound is really loud in my that was the other part of it as well, that at the start of the birth, before it kind of started to get a bit more, I don't know what word to use, feeling it more. That I'd sung and like sounded through the process at the start, and just that really helped me to come into my body as well and be in my womb. And yeah, and as I said earlier, every time I would look in the mirror as I was having a sensation, that I could still see Teo up high. I could feel his foot in the same position that it had been for ages. um, and the fibroids down the bottom. And then because something that I had wanted was for my son to be there for the birth, but we ended up, it was about 7 a.m. I think, and my mum came and picked him up, and that was, and then he was born sometime around 9:40 in the morning. We weren't sure exactly of the time. But yeah, so then after it was more, yeah, I remember when my son woke up and it was like the day started happening, and that was when it kind of started to get a bit more intense for me. And I didn't have, yeah, I was like, yeah, is it just because there's so much going on? I remember that thinking like, I can't be that far into it because I'm still so like in my organizing him to go to my mum's, asking my partner, has he got food? Like, have you texted
Mm.
her? He's like, I thought you texted her. And I was like, no, I'm birthing a baby.
Yeah.
Like, it was so funny. Um,
So Zana, you said you had wanted Rome to be at the birth, but clearly you've changed your mind because it's feeling like you can't have that inward focus because you're feeling. Yeah, talk to me more about that.
Yeah, yeah. So it was like, well, I remember I was at that point, I'd vomited into a bucket, and he got the bucket for me, and then he put the hot water bottle on my back, and it was so sweet. But I remember looking at him, and he was just sitting there looking at me, and it was pulling me out of my
Yeah,
where I was at.
body.
And
Mm.
yeah, I really noticed that. And um, so yeah, then when after he left, I felt I could relax again more, just knowing that he was tended to, because my partner was trying to, tend to, he just wanted to be next to me and
Yeah.
then next to my son. And yeah, it just felt like a bit too much going on.
Mm.
So then he left, and um because yeah, up until that point there never really hadn't been like my waters hadn't broken or anything like that. And so I was still really in the thinking that birth was gonna be going on for a lot longer. Um, and I was in the shower, and that was when I started to have some blood splotting out, and that was when the sensations, there was no gap between the sensations. And I remember being like remembering about oh, I've completely blanked on the word now, uterine rupture. That was one of the things that I knew that I had to be aware of in that process. And um, I was like, one of the signs is that there's bleeding and that there's no, that the pain is constant. And I was
Well,
like,
the contraction is
"Mm,
yeah, constant too. Yeah.
yeah, yeah." And so that was when I was like, oh, there's bleeding and there's, yeah, that it was constant sensation. And I was in my mind, and because I was really verbal in the process, I kind of just talked myself through it in a way. And I remember one time at one point being like, oh, this just feels so good. Like, and then I'm just trying to like, I really wanted to bring some lightness and some fun to it because can um, just, yeah, that light energy and just that the excitement of getting to birth a baby.
Yeah.
Because I can feel how sometimes it's easy for me to get into the like the heaviness of it. Or,
Mm, mm,
so, yeah, and that was yeah, and so then that was at that point, I said that out loud to my partner, and that was when he got a little bit unsure. And in that moment, I just brought my energy into my heart, and I could just feel like just that everything was fine. Like it was like this, it was, yeah, such an interesting experience because my whole being knew that all was well. And
mm,
so then that was what I was just saying, all is well, all is well. And then all yeah, the pain, I guess, just completely stopped at that point, and my body just completely changed what it was doing. Like my hips started turning in a different way, and um, that was when on that first sensation like that when there was just no, yeah, there was no pain, and it was just this full then there's like this roaring noise that was coming out of me, and that was when my waters broke, and there was a lot of meconium in the water as well. And so yeah, I remember, yeah, and again, it was like I could see my logic, like it felt like the process of being in my body, and also exactly what my mind was there for, to give me some information when I needed it, and then I could choose to take it on or not. So it was like, oh, there's meconium in the water. That could indicate that the baby's stressed. Do I feel like the baby's stressed? And again, come into my womb, into my body, and I was like, no, everything really feels fine. Um, like there wasn't a part of me that felt afraid in the process, and yeah, that was yeah, because I think leading up to the birth, another fear that I had that I would, um, yeah, I didn't know what it was going to be like. I'd never been experienced birth really in the way that it's designed to be experienced, I think. And yeah, I wanted to know that I would be able to stay grounded, and I was worried that I wouldn't, that I would get upset or worried or fearful and yeah, into my head. And
mm,
so it was yeah, really cool to have that experience of getting to just keep coming back to my body in the process, and that all was well. But my partner, I didn't realize at the time, but he had taken some of the towels down to the birth keeper and showed him the towels. And she said that it was fine, it was normal. And so
mm,
that gave him some um, peace in that moment. And then I don't know how long it was after that, but not very much longer. Um, yeah, because I'd been in the shower at that point, and I just walked out into the lounge, and yeah, and then my hips were tilting under, and I was just on my knees, and quite my knees were quite close together, and talking with my partner about it again afterwards, and he was like, yeah, I almost wanted to say to you, like, do you need to widen your legs?
mm.
Thankfully he didn't say that. um yeah, and then he just came out, like I didn't push or anything like that. He just came out like, yeah, I remember like I had one sensation or one of those. It was like the feeling where my body was just doing what it was doing, and then a sound was coming out of me, and then the baby was coming down, I guess. Um, because he was still so high up all the way to the end. And then I guess he must have just pushed. I don't know. And even yeah, then he just came out. And then he was in my arms and he cried straight away. And my
Wow.
partner was just so happy, like I absolutely ecstatic. um yeah, and then that was when yeah, we were sitting there for a little bit, and then I realized that I hadn't videoed the birth, and I really wanted to video it.
Oh,
um and then that was when we got our birth keeper up from downstairs, and she helped with, yeah, she gave me some arnica and made me some Don Quai, I think it is, tea. And yeah, and that was helpful to have another set of hands at that point because um, yeah, my partner he was just so ecstatic. And I remember saying, I remember we're still in the like the third part of birth, and this was the part that I was most unsure about as
Mm,
well. And I could feel I just wanted to be there in my body and just lie there. And he was just ecstatic.
mhm.
And yeah, and then yeah,
Was was Teo's body born with his head? So it was all in one sensation. It wasn't that his head was birthed and then a pause and then the rest of his body.
yeah, it was all in one sensation. There was no pause in between. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I did have some tearing as well, which I haven't had it looked at, so I don't know um to what extent it was, but I just used Manuka honey on that, and it took about 6 weeks. And I really, in postpartum, really tried to rest as much as possible. And it's healed from what I can tell really well. It feels good without any stitches or anything like that.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and so then after he was born, yeah, he cried straight away, and he was just covered in meconium. There's so much meconium. And um and then when it was time for the placenta to come, I just rolled over and it just came out. And because that was the other thing with the scar, and sometimes it can and again, like even as I say these things, I can feel how aware I am of not wanting to like more stories to be put on what can happen in birth, because
Mhm.
yeah, not wanting to contribute to that narrative.
Yeah.
But also that was part of my experience, and that what I was afraid of in the afterbirth time,
Mm.
and that retained placenta, or that some part would come off or not if the placenta had grown into the scar tissue,
Mhm.
which again I really felt like yeah wasn't hadn't happened. And yeah, it was crazy how it just came out. So I turned over and it came out. Yeah.
Well, how long after, do you know sort of roundabout how long after he was born that the placenta was birthed?
No, I'm not sure. Yeah, but I it would have been sometime between no more than 2 hours.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah, because I remember there's a photo from yeah, that was over 2 hours later.
And was Teo still attached to the placenta when it was birthed?
Yeah, yeah, and we left it on for just till the end of the day, and then we cut it off. I had thought about doing the lotus birth, and then I just found with having a toddler and moving, and it just felt easier. But
Mhm.
I when we did cut the cord, I did feel a bit of I could feel my being a little bit of like, oh, I think I really wanted to keep
Oh.
the placenta on. So
Mm.
that was interesting to have,
Mm.
yeah, not knowing how it would feel when it was, and maybe that, yeah, I'm not sure.
Mm.
But it was, yeah, it just felt like just life, and then life goes on. Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a journey. How amazing. What a story, Zana. And there's just so many instances that you've described of that just needing to tune in and ask yourself, um, is this okay? What's going on? Am I okay? Um, and just listening to your body and trusting whatever was coming through for you. How amazing.
Yeah, it was so empowering to do that because, yeah, as I said earlier, I think just getting to trust myself and that I was responsible for myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. How would you compare the sort of early weeks and months? I mean, Teo's 3 months old now, but um, eh, compared to after having your first birth.
Yeah, hugely different. Like this postpartum has been so, um, it's been equal parts grief and joy. Because I was like, oh, this is how it could feel. Like,
Mm.
yeah, that feeling, like the birth hormones. I didn't even realize that I'd torn until maybe 2 days later. Um, and then I was like, oh, yeah. And then it was like almost a week before I started to feel not so high. It was, yeah, it was so, yeah, just getting to be in that, and just the simplicity of um all going to hop into bed together at the end of the day and we were just right there, and it just felt slow and um, yeah, yeah, in the pouring rain, like there was nowhere to go or be, and just to enjoy, yeah, being a family of four.
Yeah. 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 Has your man come down off his high yet?
Yeah, he said he had to go out, like he went outside and put his feet on the ground, and he said he had to like I think said he must have cried or something. Like he said he felt all this energy in him that he just had to release somehow, and he didn't know what to do with it.
Oh,
Um,
how beautiful.
yeah, and because I wonder with him being a C-section too, to get to see that. Although another thing, when he could see Teo's head coming out, the umbilical cord was like bunched up, and so he said there was a moment where he thought that like yeah something else was coming out, that his body wasn't fully formed. So it's such a different experience for the support person, or you're yeah, we're
Yeah.
like in that, and then he's like, what is that? Yeah. Mm.
What what would you, I mean, it sort of feels like perhaps you've spoken into this already, but maybe there's something else you'd like to share. But what have you learned about yourself
Mm.
through this whole journey?
Yeah, I think it's like been a lot of letting go of stories about myself too. Like I think, or even just that experience of just being alone for pretty much the whole process, and Peter was with me for the last um 2 and a bit hours,
Mm.
and that I could just that being in and within myself, just being with myself felt so good.
Mhm.
Which yeah, saying that out loud sounds interesting, but just yeah, how and yeah, I think it's just been like a letting go of like the so many ideas around how things could be. And I remember us talking in those early weeks after, being like, oh, if we can do this, birth our baby like this, like what else is possible? Was the feeling. And um yeah, it just was like such that bringing that trust in my knowing. I think that often in the past I might have second guessed, which I could see coming through in threads in Rome's pregnancy, but then I didn't trust that, and I also didn't have the support as well to make different decisions, and which is why I feel like that having yeah support in whatever way that it is that you need is so important, and because we're all so different.
Yeah. Yeah.
And birth is so different.
Yeah. It was good, touching, to hear you say earlier in reflecting on Rome's birth, um, when I think I'd asked you, would you have done anything differently, knowing what you do now? And you mentioned the word compassion. You had compassion for yourself around what it had, especially when it all got really intense in those last couple of weeks there, or near the end there. And yeah, good, because we do make the best choices we can for our child based on the support and information that we have available to us at the time, and our level of awareness that we have. And that's where you are at that point in time. And having that experience perhaps is an important part that led you to where you are now, and to this birthing journey, and to this beautiful self healing and self discovery and self empowerment journey that you have, that it's culminated in. So yeah, like I think anybody who's listening, whatever choices, what the path that you took with your first experience, especially if it's a traumatic one and you're holding on to this, I should have made different decisions. I shouldn't have done X, Y, Z. I should have advocated for myself more. Why didn't I say no to this or that or whatever? Just come back to that reminder that you, more than anybody, wanted a positive, safe outcome for you and your baby. And so, whatever choices you are making at that time, you are making them in the belief that that was what was going to bring about the safest, most positive outcome. And you were basing that, of course, like with yeah, on what information you had available to you at that time. And with new information, new insights, new support, etc., you have access to a whole lot of different options, in a different part of your life. But yeah, I think it's important to have compassion for ourselves around our journey, no matter how it unfolds. Yeah.
Yeah, and you learn so much from it, and I think as well, that's how my experience, I've learned so much in getting to see how I could have done things differently, that
Mm.
I was able to choose differently. And also that I think in some ways maybe it was easier for me to choose differently because I'd already been down the route. I already knew what it felt like to have a scan that would tell me something that I didn't want to hear.
Mhm.
So, I had that,
Yeah.
yeah, having walked that path already,
Yeah.
it was easy to choose
Yeah.
different.
I do sometimes have this sort of conundrum of sorts in my work and my role of feeling like I want to be doing more in the way of preventative work rather than all this, uh, you know, helping people after they've already experienced a traumatic birth. But the reality is that often women aren't ready to go there, to do that inner work, to look at the things, to ask themselves the questions, to explore their, conditioning and their beliefs and that until they've had that experience. And that's what I mean by our level of awareness, where sometimes it takes actually going through something that is a less than ideal experience, a traumatic experience, in order to um, have the drive, the impetus to do the work. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
but as you say, it is such a conundrum, eh? Because I feel such this desire, like how to support women so that we can choose a different path from the start,
yeah.
so that we don't have to.
Yeah.
No, I think that's
Yeah,
like,
but you can only meet people where they're at, so they need
yeah,
to be ready to hear that it could be different, or to explore yeah, those learnings. So and that's part of why I love the shared story, what you're doing here, and having the likes of this podcast, so that others who perhaps haven't yet had a baby and they listen to these stories go, oh, okay, actually, maybe I want to explore this now rather than yeah, wait till after I've had a not so great birth. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, totally. That's an idea I've sort of been playing with at the moment, is like the story that I have that everything has to be so hard to be worth it, or that you have to go through something hard for it to mean something. And it's kind of like, well, what if it could all be easy? Or what if it could, yeah, we can just birth our baby.
Mm.
What if? I don't know.
Mhm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah, and I loved you bringing that up, that whole potential that's in the unknown, yeah, there's the potential for all sorts that, yeah, perhaps we couldn't even imagine how amazing and beautiful and healing and it can be.
Yeah, even more than we could even imagine.
Yeah, yeah, the gift of the unknown, of surrendering to the unknown, of sinking into trust, eh?
Yeah, yeah, and then all of the humanness that comes with that, because when you're in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Zarna, thank you. Thank you so much. Wow, what a special morning it's been for me. I can never get enough of hearing stories like yours. Uh, and thank you again for the gift of sharing that story with um, whoever's listening. Um, yeah, so thanks. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your vulnerable sharing and yeah, go you.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it feels so cool to get to be on this side of birth and getting to express and share my experience. And yeah, yeah, still kind of can't believe it.